Here we go. Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to this talk. It's my fourth time speaking at ETHCC, and I would like to take a moment to thank all the volunteers for their hard work. These people don't get enough praise. We wouldn't be here without them, so big shout out to Ethereum France, Jérôme, Bettina, and all the lovely people who have been working around the clock to make this happen. So yeah, thank you, everyone. So, my name is Mehdi. I'm a co-founder and director of Sigma Prime. We've been doing security assessments in the web3 space for quite some time now, and we thought it could be a good idea to try to distill some of the information, insights that we think might be useful for the community. So here's the agenda for my talk. I'll start with a quick introduction. For those of you who don't know who we are, as I said, we're an information security consultancy focused on blockchain technology, providing security assessment services, a lot of smart contract security reviews, as you can imagine, EVM mostly, but also non-EVM stuff. But we're very comfortable diving deeper into the stack, right? And have been working with L1s, L2s, a bunch of infrastructure providers to essentially help them strengthen the security posture of their software. So we look into novel consensus algorithms, new cryptographic primitives, and also new networking interfaces. A lot of work has been done on bridges and layer 2s, as you can imagine, over the past 18 months. And we're also quite well known for our fuzzing capability. We do a bunch of fuzzing for a lot of different blockchain foundations out there. And occasionally, we dabble in red teaming and social engineering to help our clients strengthen the operational security side. That's half of what we do, the half that I look after. And we're also the founders and maintainers of Lighthouse. How many people here are stakers? Yay. How many people here run Lighthouse? Yes. So Lighthouse is a Rust implementation of the Ethereum consensus layer. It's 5 years old. It's fast, blazingly fast. It's written in Rust. It's free and open source. And you have the commitment of the founding team at Sigma Prime that it'll remain that way. It will always be free, always be open source, always be a public good. It's heavily focused on security, as you can imagine, due to the DNA of the company. Yeah, I'm extremely proud of the great work that the Lighthouse crew have been putting over the years, and we're now responsible for about 35% of the user market share on the Beacon chain. On the security side, I put up a few client logos. I'm sure some of those are familiar to you guys. We are fundamentally blockchain agnostic. We help all sorts of different chains, but it just happens that the bulk of the work happens on Ethereum because perhaps that's where most of the developers live these days. We're headquartered in Sydney, but have been hiring people all around the world over the past few years. And in fact, about 18 months ago or 2 years ago, we've crossed that threshold where we have more people outside of Australia than in Australia. All right, cool. So we started diving into the stuff that we've been doing over the past few years. And we've conducted over 150 security assessments over a span of 7.5 years. And we currently have, it's actually 14, there's a mistake there, 14 full-time security engineers now. One thing that I thought quite interesting was the percentage of reviews that have at least one critical or one high severity issue, right? So it essentially means that if you come, statistically speaking, you come and engage Sigma Prime for security assessments, they're over half the chance that you will find something that you should really fix. The number of issues on average per review is 13, which I thought was quite low, to be quite honest. But we got to keep in mind that this is an average, not a median, right? Which means that for some of our most sort of loyal customers, we do a lot of change reviews, where the scope is very limited to a special feature that's been added or a very particular change that's been introduced. And for those reviews, usually the report, contains just a couple of lows, couple of informational issues, nothing necessarily very substantial. And one of the reviews for which we've found, a large number of bugs, 68 security vulnerabilities, including, I believe, over 20 criticals and high severity issues. So these guys didn't end up deploying in production, and it's probably for the best. So talking a lot about criticals, highs, medium, I thought it'd be a good idea to just lay it out there as severity rating matrix. When you find a bug, it's very important to qualify the severity, right? You don't want to press the big red button every time you find something. So I'll take an example. For instance, if you find a reentrancy in a smart contract, a lot of people tend to think that, oh my God, this is kind of like the end of the world for that protocol, right? But it really, really depends on the likelihood, right? So, if that particular function that's vulnerable is gated behind a modifier and effectively only accessible by one account, then the likelihood of exploitation is definitely not high, right? Because there's perhaps only one user in the world that's capable of pulling that off. And that user can also be behind the multisig, right? So depending on that context, the likelihood would either be a low or a medium, and obviously the impact here is high. Say through that reentrancy, you're able to drain the funds. So therefore, a reentrancy can very well be a medium severity finding. More data points. We've conducted 114 on-chain assessments. So, smart contract assessments that live on the blockchain. The vast majority of those are EVM-based, so a bunch of Solidity. But we've also done some WASM, some eBPF, and whatnot. And we have 44 off-chain reviews. And those off-chain reviews are, the stuff that doesn't live on-chain, basically. So it's infrastructure, usually, blockchain nodes, L1s, L2s, sequencers, relayers, and whatnot. Wallets as well, mobile wallets, etc. Most of those reviews are, most of those projects are developed in Rust or Go. What does that mean? Like, this is the distribution. 70% of the work that we conduct is targeting smart contracts, and 30% is what I refer to as infrastructure or off-chain stuff. Keep in mind that this is the number of reviews, not a metric tracking the volume of hours spent or revenue generated. Typically for Rust and Golang security assessments, we tend to spend a lot more time than Solidity-based ones. So in fact, if you were to look at it from a revenue generating perspective, the split would be closer to perhaps 40, 60, or even 45, 55. We don't keep track of that stuff, so. And this is the severity distribution. And I guess the one thing we could take out of this is the higher you go in the severity rating, the less frequent that bug, that type of bug gets raised, which is a good thing, right? A great thing for the ecosystem. The other way around would have been very, very bad. This is the number of reviews we've conducted over the years. So we started in 2016, 2017, and then, started growing steadily, then a bit more slowly, and then 2021 happened, right? And we've, almost more than doubled the number of reviews that we've conducted. 2023 is a snapshot taken, I believe, a couple of weeks ago. So we're on track to be sort of doing a bit more than last year, but nowhere near that same sort of exponential growth that we've seen in 2021, which is probably a good thing for my sanity. This is a breakdown per category, right? So we've been reviewing all sorts of projects over the past 7 years. L1s, L2s, AMMs, tokens, derivatives. There's a category called MISC services for things like payment channels or utility contracts. A lot of cross-chain stuff. And I guess what a takeaway from this is we're able to find high severity and critical findings in all sorts of categories, in all of them specifically, perhaps, except the MISC services one. And if you look at this, the category that has the most chances of raising critical findings and high severity findings is AMMs. So I guess the takeaway is building a secure and safe AMM is tough. So we've also taken the categories over the years. As you can see, it kind of matches, obviously, the number of reviews conducted over the years. And Mehdi, one of our team members who helped me with the data collection, made a point. And I was like, it's interesting if you overlay the crypto market cap. Obviously, caveat, correlation does not mean causation, but it kind of makes sense, right? Projects get very, very well funded through ICOs or external VC funding, and have to deploy that capital into engineering work, and at some point, that work needs to be reviewed. So if you see, we're peaking in our activity about 9 months after the crypto market has peaked. Again, take that with a grain of salt. All right, so we've also gone back and looked at the most common pitfalls that we've seen over the years. And unsurprisingly, you still have the usual suspects: reentrancies, improper access control, unsafe external calls. The stuff that we've been seeing like in 2018, 2019 is unfortunately still present in those reviews. When we're talking about DeFi, price oracle manipulations, problems in accounting and overflows are definitely foot guns for developers. Proxies are an interesting one. You would think that by now people would have that figured out, but until quite recently, one of the projects that we reviewed had completely misunderstood the difference between transparent proxies and UUPS proxies. So in fact, Richard and Dimitri from my team have given a great talk at the DeFi Security 101 Summit explaining to beginners in the space the difference between the two and how to best use proxies if you need to. We've done a bunch of smart contract wallets. Those are always exciting. Most of those we found replay attacks. So people not using nonces. Please use nonces if you're using smart contract wallets. And you can go all the way to factory takeovers, where you're not only are able to compromise one wallet, you're able to compromise all wallets generated by that factory. Scary. Bridges, double spends. So double spends aren't a vulnerability itself. It's an impact caused by the exploitation of a vulnerability. But obviously, that's something super juicy if you're able to find that. And interestingly, a lot of work has been done on making Merkle proofs safe to use in the context of L2s and cross-chain platforms. But unfortunately, we still see issues in the way the validation of those Merkle proof gets done. And I think it's important to note that smart contract security is only a subset of Web3 security. You can get owned through so many different attack vectors. So the off-chain stuff that I was talking about earlier is critical, right? You want to make sure that you're not only secure your smart contracts on-chain, but also your off-chain infrastructure. Relayers, sequencers, and whatnot, you got to spend the time, you got to spend the effort and the resources to secure those too. Web applications, I think we're in a better state now. Some of you may remember Ether Delta in 2017, which was, I believe, the first DEX on Ethereum. People got wrecked because of a cross-site scripting attack, which is a web application-specific attack. I think developers are getting better in using battle-tested frameworks, but very, very much something you should pay attention to. Cloud infrastructure, obviously, you're deploying, say, your dApp onto an S3 bucket. You got to make sure that that S3 bucket is tight, right? If any person can come in and write to that S3 bucket, it's very trivial to just replace the content with a malicious page. And obviously, we've seen social media being used as a spear phishing vector. And that's always very sad to see. And in fact, not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, one of our clients' Discord got popped. And their users lost, I believe, about 43 Ether to a scammer. So it's really sad, and I think, to me, it highlights the importance of taking security seriously across the entire stack. Social engineering doesn't only happen to beginners, right? even power users in the space get phished. So a lot of people on their high horse think that, oh, this will never happen to me. Chances are it will. And if you're a target, it's perhaps easy enough to craft a lure that will make you, release keys or sign transactions that you don't want to sign. Key management is obviously critical as well. What do you do when you have an employee that's not happy and he has access to those keys and decides to leave the company and take those keys with you? So you got to have a proper key rotation in place, and just sort of hygiene, key management is very, very important. All right, now I want to talk about how we think projects out there should prepare for a security review. First thing, you have to document stuff. Documentation is critical. And what do I mean by documentation? What do we like to see in our projects? We want system overviews, things that are easy to understand, high-level overviews. Diagrams would be nice, but you can also just use plain English to describe what your project is meant to be doing. User flow diagrams are great too. We want to know how you're expecting your users to interact with your protocol. If you've made design choices, always good to document them. If you have restrictions or limitations in what your protocol can or cannot do, always a good idea to write that down. Dependencies, I don't see that often, unfortunately, but we're all relying and building on top of other protocols, but it's always a good thing if you can keep track of what project out there are you using. If there's a patch to be applied, it'll be easier to go through a list than being notified on Twitter by some random person saying, hey, I think you're using this software. Perhaps you should look into this advisory. Access control, privileged roles, that ties into centralization risks. We don't judge at SIGP, right? We're not here to say, oh, your project is not decentralized. As long as it's clearly stated somewhere on your website, somewhere in the documentation, it's a design choice. It's up to your users to decide whether they want to trust you with that particular choice, but we do want you to be open about it. And if you have a formal spec, it's great. We can do stuff like differential fuzzing. We can take the spec and fuzz it against your implementation and hopefully help you surface bugs that show perhaps a discrepancy between the two. And yes, writing comments is important. A lot of people I met were like, nah, I don't need to. My code is clear enough. No, it doesn't work like this. Not spec comments aren't enough. I want to see inline comments every time you're touching, modifying a state variable. Some projects do an amazing job at this, others not so much. And yeah, I like this quote. Documentation is like sex. When it's good, it's very, very good. When it's bad, it's better than nothing. But just like sex, if it's bad, don't expect us to welcome you back. Testing is important. We conduct our own testing at SIGP every time we conduct these assessments, just because that's how we do things. But you should do internal testing as well. This is very important. Positive unit testing is the first thing you should start with, right? If you have a DeFi protocol, I put funds in, I should be able to withdraw those funds. You'd be surprised the number of projects that don't test that, right? They're like, oh yeah, we're getting a security audit. The security audit will try that. It's a very basic thing, making sure that the withdraw function, which is a very critical function in your protocol, actually works. So that's what we call positive unit testing. And then you've got negative unit testing, which is the parts that are not meant to be handled by your code. And those should be tested too. Once you've done that, end-to-end testing or integration testing, where you deploy on a test net, say deploy on Gurley, you interact with Aave, there's deployments of all the major DeFi primitives out there, always a good idea to do that. And once you've done all of that, make sure that after deployment, things run the way they should run. Bonus points for formal verification and fuzzing. We don't see that enough, but some projects are extremely serious about that, and we always appreciate seeing those things in their repo. There's a bunch of testing frameworks out there, obviously. We're huge fans of Brownie and Foundry lately. Don't ask us to write our tests in Hard Hat or any JavaScript framework. Nothing against Hard Hat. It's been an amazing, popular framework out there. We're just not huge fans of JavaScript at Sigma Prime. And yeah, just because you've counted all the trees doesn't mean you've seen the forest. So this is why you'd be potentially interested in getting an external security assessment. So when should that happen? There's been a lot of debate yesterday around the fact that some people think that the only time you should be getting a security review is just before deployment. I disagree completely. It's whenever you're ready for feedback. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with calling in an external security assessor to help you halfway through your development lifecycle. Say you've developed your core features and you're unsure about their security posture. You have a bunch of other features dangling around that are meant to be merged in, say in a few months. Nothing wrong with getting a firm like ours to help you with whatever is ready. Yeah, always a good idea to get any changes reviewed and updated. Running static analyzers on the code base is important, and we expect everyone to do that. All right, I only have 1 minute left. So to wrap up, I've got a couple of announcements. First of all, Web3 security is hard, not surprising. But I think we're getting better. The whole community is getting in a much better place. First announcement, we're publishing over 50 security assessment reports today. There's a QR code, feel free to scan it. It'll take you to our public audits repo, and we've just dumped a lot of very interesting content, particularly for people who are trying to break into the space. Solo auditors out there, people doing C4 contests. This is a goldmine, and I'd like to take a moment to thank our clients who have agreed to let us publish this stuff. If you could do the math, 50, we're already had about 15 or 20, it still means that the vast majority of our work is under NDA and not published, unfortunately. But I'm here to make a promise. We'll always publish if we can. And last announcement, we're reviving our internship program. So if you'd like to get into the space, doesn't matter how much experience you have, doesn't matter how much blockchain security knowledge you have, reach out. We're interested in having clever, keen people break into the space. We'll go through internal training, engagement shadowing, and hopefully you can help us build some cool tools for Sigma Prime, but for the community as well. And with that, I might have the time to take one question. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, cool. Hi. A really interesting presentation. One thing that I found always with security firms, and at least how security audits are done today in the space, is they're done once, and then the protocol evolves, and they're never done again, or very rarely done again, especially with the protocols that run on proxies. How do you see that, or how do you think that should be done? Is there something, it's not traditional. In software development, you do, rolling audits that you do every so often and so on. But in this space, it doesn't seem to happen.
I agree. So the question, I guess, is around continuous security assessments. We do have what we call master services agreements with a selected set of customers, and those essentially bake us into their security development lifecycle. So it's easy when you have a firm like ours on retainer. So we dedicate time for you throughout the year, and every single change that you're making to your on-chain or off-chain infrastructure, you can run it past us. I wish, obviously, more projects were able to do so. We're a relatively small team, so we can't take on so many of those contracts. But I know a bunch of other firms in the space that do the exact same. And I believe that's one solution to the problem, coupled with strong CI, GitHub Actions, running static analyzers, fuzzers every time there's a merge to master. Those things should hopefully be able to catch a few bugs for you. Cool. Thanks again. Cheers.